Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. Today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about when it comes to back training, the weighted pull-up versus the barbell row, or any form of row, because this is something that comes up every now and then, and the question becomes, where do you fit each of these in your training? Which one's better at any given time or any given point? So let me put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, work on skilling at my crafting a little bit, and let's talk about this. Now, I don't want this to be a debate of which one is better, because neither one is better. These are both fantastic exercises, and most variations of these two exercises are fantastic variations. We think of a pull-up, normally that's a pronated grip pull-up. There's different grip widths. There's different grip types, like the hammer grip or parallel grip. There's underhand grip, which is a chin-up. I mean, rows, we run into the same thing, pronated grip, supinated grip. Talking about a pin lay row off the floor. You're talking about a T-bar row. What are you talking about? Those are all good exercises. Every single one of those is a fantastic exercise. And I think over the years, I think it would actually be a good idea for most people to build a reasonable strength base on a couple of different variations of those. I don't think that's a bad idea. They're good exercises. The question we get into is, which one and why? People say, well, just do both. I'm going to be honest with you. There's going to be phases in your training at different points in your training over the years where you can't do both. Your recovery is not going to allow for you to get sufficient workload to do both. You're not going to be able to build a base and continue to progress on both at any given time. That's not always doable. So that's really bad advice. That's kind of like that whole bodybuilder thing of just throwing everything and just hope that something sticks. That's a bad way to go about doing things. Now, it's pretty obvious that for novices, I prefer the barbell row, right? And there's a reason for that. Number one, barbell row tends to work more total muscles through the body, right? It does work more of your core, more of your spinal erectors, more hip, even gets a little glute, all that stuff involved, right? It's a little bit more of a full body exercise. It tends to carry over really well to your deadlift, particularly if you're rowing off the floor. So it's an accessory movement, almost an assistance movement to the deadlift, right? Most novices aren't strong enough on the deadlift to overtrain. In other words, we don't tend to throw a lot of volume on the deadlift at novice lifters because they can't always handle the volume. Number two, they're not really pushing enough weight on the deadlift for their overall recovery to really get that beat up. And rows let you really bridge the gap there. They let you still get a heavy pull from the floor or from a low position that will carry over to the deadlift that you can do a lot of volume with, even with a really light weight. You can get a good training effect with a pretty light weight and a novice off of a row. And you can throw a lot of volume at them. Like for me, I have them doing up to 15 sets a week on my novice program, which is a lot. Granted, that is a lot of rowing. But novices can oftentimes recover from that with some basic progression. So it lets you bridge the gap in a much lower deadlift volume and lower deadlift intensity workout that will actually train the deadlift, carry over to it, but builds the back, biceps, rear delts, all that stuff that will help with all your other lifts. It will just help put size on you. Furthermore, even though we could argue that the pull-up in that case, people say, well, the weighted pull-up is probably better for the lats and maybe the biceps and stuff like that. It probably hits them a little bit better. It actually does. It actually does. But most novice lifters aren't strong enough to do weighted pull-ups. In other words, we can't throw a whole lot of pull-ups with them. They're not going to be doing 15 or 20 pull-ups in a workout, right? They're not strong enough. And particularly if they're a little bit heavy. Like if you've got a novice lifter who's carrying a little bit extra fat, they just can't do any appreciable volume on pull-ups. But you can throw a 65-pound barbell at them and have them do 5 sets of rows, right? And they can do that and they can progress on it. We can't do that with the pull-up. So because of their just inherent lack of strength, number one, their lack of strength on the deadlift, meaning we're not going to overtrain them that much with pulling, better carry over to the deadlift and their inability to do a pull-up. The barbell row is a no-brainer for novice lifters. I think it is way better of a choice. And that's why I tend to throw it into novice programs, and I program it into a lot of intermediate programs too. It's a real good choice. For those reasons, I think it works best. The problem we run into with barbell rowing at a certain point, though, if you're really trying to do any serious amount of deadlift volume and you're getting reasonably strong on the deadlift, like once your deadlift is above where you could do 400 pounds for reps, deadlift volume and total fatigue on your lower back and everything else starts to become an issue when you're training the deadlift with any degree of workload. Like when you're actually working on the deadlift, Barbell rows can become a problem. They're going to take away from your actual deadlifting. They're going to reduce the amount of deadlifting volume you can do every week, particularly once you've built a strength base. It's just too much extra fatigue sometimes. Not saying always, there are times when you can do both, but when you are really pushing your deadlifts, it can be a problem. It can limit deadlift training volume. It's just going to reduce training response. So what you end up doing is you have to compromise a lot, and so therefore then your upper back and everything gets neglected. Well, pull-ups work fantastic in that situation. They work fantastic in that situation. I mean, they're very taxing. Don't get me wrong, weighted pull-ups put a lot of stress on your body, but they're pretty much upper body focused. They will take the spinal erectors out. They'll take all of that stuff out, the extra hip work and everything out, so that you can focus more on deadlifts at different points in your training. Furthermore, if you're at a point to where, again, any sort of fatigue is becoming a problem for your lower body, squatting, deadlifting, all of that is mounting up, you're doing standing presses, you're just simply running out of axial loading recovery, but you need the extra upper body work. We kind of come back to that pull-up. The pull-up is, for some muscles of the upper body, a superior exercise, right? If you're trying to put on overall mass, if you just had to pick between the two and programming wasn't a consideration, you weren't worried about overall fatigue, the barbell row has more potential to put more overall size on the body. But specific to the upper body, the weighted pull-up is a better exercise. It does hit more muscles of the upper body a little better, whereas in the barbell row uses more muscles throughout the body a little bit better. So when you're needing to do that because you're reaching the limits of your lower body, and particularly your back, like your lower back, axial loading, all these things start to really mount up. The pull-up is a lift that you can get away with more training volume on. You can do more volume on the pull-up than you're going to be able to do on rows without interfering with those other lifts so much. So I think particularly when you want to put a lot of focus on both your deadlift or you're trying to put the focus on some of these lifts a little more specific to the upper body, I think that's where the pull-up really shines. And I'm a big fan of the pull-up. I think the weighted pull-up is one of the best overall upper body developers there is. I'm a big fan of it. I do it myself. It's something I do 3 times a week on camera. The weighted pull-up, even though I've historically done tons of rows, and I'm a big fan of the row for base building. I'm a big fan of rows for base building and for helping build just your base overall strength and base musculature, and particularly helping build your deadlift early on. I think at a certain threshold, though, your deadlift needs to build your deadlift. Instead of worrying about other lifts like that to help it, you just need to deadlift more. And then the pull-up is really better when you're really trying to maximize your size in your upper body. You're trying to bring up all of this, your rear delts, your lats, your biceps. All of these things, the pull-up really, really shines. Plus, it has a lot of carryover to other secondary muscles. It works the long head of the tricep, the upper chest. It is an all-around better upper body accessory, even for things like your bench press, for your standing press. So if you're going to compete in something that uses those, like bench press and powerlifting, or the press and strength lifting, the pull-up does have a little better carryover. It's a better exercise in that situation. So I think a lot of it, realistically, when it comes down to picking in any given phase of your training, does your focus need to be in the row or the pull-up? And like I said, you might be training one exclusively, but you might simply be putting more focus on one. Even if you're training both, you're probably not pushing both of these lifts to their limits. You're going to have to pick one or the other at any given time to really put your focus into. I would tend to base it around, number one, how much deadlifting are you trying to do right now, right? That's a big determiner. Number two, are you focused on picking this lift for your overall development, or are you trying to be more specific to the upper body? Because while they both work the mid-traps, they both work the lats, they both work the biceps, they both work your grip, right? They work all these things. The pull-up does work more muscles throughout the upper body a little more effectively. It does, whereas in the standing row, particularly the pendlay row off the floor, tends to get a little bit more posterior chain, more spinal erector, right? It puts a little more focus on the lower body, and I feel like it does have really good carryover to things like the deadlift, particularly if you're pulling off the floor. So again, it kind of comes down to what you are trying to do with the exercise. What role is it filling in getting things done? Both of them can make you big, right? Both of them can make you strong. Both of these exercises have the potential to put a fair amount of size and strength on you, but at any given point, we're always going to have more focus in one direction or another, and you've got to make these exercises fit into the grand scheme of your training. So when we start asking about, which one is better, neither one's better. They're both fantastic exercises. They're both fantastic exercises. This question does become very specific to the context of what are you trying to do with the focus of your training, with your recovery resources, everything else. So I hope it has been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.